Have you ever noticed that money can follow you everywhere, even when you're not spending it? You could be making dinner, and out of nowhere, your mind whispers, what if something goes wrong next month? You could be lying in bed, exhausted after a long day, ready to fall asleep. Then suddenly your brain starts opening invisible bills that don't even exist yet. What if I lose my job? What if prices keep going up? What if my savings aren't enough? What if I never catch up? And before you know it, it's 2 in the morning. Your body is in bed, but your mind is already living in a future that hasn't happened. If that sounds familiar, I want you to know something before we go any further. You're not weak. You're not failing at life. And you're definitely not the only person carrying this around. Money worries have a strange way of making people feel lonely. Everyone else seems fine. People post vacations. New cars. Nice dinners. Big smiles. Meanwhile, you're standing in the grocery store quietly adding numbers in your head before putting something back on the shelf. Nobody sees that part. Nobody sees the moment you check your bank account before saying yes to dinner with friends. Nobody sees you smiling during the conversation while a small part of your mind is wondering if your card is going to work. Money anxiety is quiet. It doesn't always look like panic. Sometimes it looks like saying, I'm just tired. Sometimes it looks like snapping at people you love over something tiny. Sometimes it looks like never really relaxing, even on your day off. Because your brain never clocks out. Maybe you've been carrying this feeling for so long that it almost feels normal now. You wake up with it. Drive to work with it. Take it into every decision. Even when you're watching a movie, part of your mind is somewhere else, trying to solve problems that don't have answers yet. That kind of worry is exhausting. Not because you're thinking too much. Because you're carrying something heavy that nobody else can see. It's like walking around with a backpack full of invisible rocks. Every bill. Every what if. Every unexpected expense. Every fear about tomorrow. One more rock. And after a while, you forget what it feels like to walk without the weight. Here's something people don't talk about enough. Sometimes it's not even about the money anymore. It's about what money represents. Safety. Freedom. The ability to breathe. The feeling that life can't suddenly knock you over. That's why losing money, or even thinking about losing it, can feel much bigger than numbers on a screen. It can feel like losing control. Imagine you're driving across a bridge. The bridge feels strong. You don't think about every little crack because you trust it. Now imagine someone tells you the bridge might not be safe. Nothing about the bridge has changed. You're still driving across the same road. But suddenly, every tiny sound makes your heart race. Every bump feels dangerous. That's what money anxiety does. Life itself hasn't always changed. But your sense of safety has. And once your brain starts questioning safety, it becomes incredibly hard to relax. That's why people often tell you, just stop worrying. As if you could flip a switch. If it were that simple, you would have done it already. Nobody chooses to spend their evenings imagining worst-case scenarios. Nobody wants to feel their stomach tighten every time their phone buzzes with a banking notification. Nobody enjoys lying awake doing mental math over and over, hoping the numbers somehow change. Your brain isn't trying to torture you, it's trying to protect you. The problem is, it doesn't know when to stop. Think of it like a smoke alarm. A smoke alarm has one job. Keep you safe. If there's a real fire, you want it to be loud. But imagine if it started going off every single time you made toast. You wouldn't say the alarm is evil. You'd say it's become too sensitive. That's exactly what can happen after months, or even years, of worrying about money. Your mind starts treating every financial thought like an emergency. A small bill feels like a disaster. A slow week at work feels like the beginning of the end. A normal expense suddenly feels like proof that everything is falling apart. And because your brain believes it's protecting you, it keeps sounding the alarm. Again. And again. And again. Here's the strange part. The more you try to force those thoughts away, the louder they often become. It's like trying not to think about a song. The harder you push it out, the more it gets stuck in your head. So you tell yourself, I just need to figure everything out. You make another budget. Then another. You check your account one more time. You replay conversations. You search for answers online. For a few minutes, it feels better. Then the worry comes back. Sometimes even stronger. Not because you're doing anything wrong. But because your mind has quietly learned something without you realizing it. It has learned that worrying feels like preparing. That if you keep thinking long enough, maybe you'll prevent something bad from happening. At first, that sounds reasonable. But there's something about this idea that almost nobody notices. And once you see it, you'll never look at your money worries the same way again. The mind starts believing that worry is a job. Not something that happens to you. Something you're supposed to do. Almost like there's an invisible voice saying, if you stop worrying, you'll miss something important. So even when nothing is happening, your brain keeps searching. Looking for danger. Looking for mistakes. Looking for the next problem before it arrives. It's like hiring a security guard who never sleeps. At first, that sounds helpful. Until you realize the guard starts seeing thieves in every shadow. That's what money anxiety can do. It doesn't just change the way you think about money. It changes the way you experience life. You stop asking, what do I want? And start asking, what can I afford to risk? Little by little, your world gets smaller. Maybe you've said no to a weekend trip you actually wanted to take. Maybe you've stayed in a job that drains you because leaving feels too dangerous. Maybe you've delayed going to the doctor. Put off fixing your car. Ignored something important because spending the money felt terrifying. From the outside, those decisions might seem practical. But inside, they're often driven by fear, not choice. And living that way for a long time does something most people never notice. It steals your ability to feel safe, even when you actually are. Think about the last time you checked your bank account. Did you feel relieved? Or did your eyes immediately start calculating how quickly the money could disappear? If you're like many people, the relief lasted only a few seconds. Then your mind jumped straight to the next question. But what about next month? That's because anxiety has a habit of moving the finish line. You tell yourself, I'll finally relax when I save this much. Then you reach that number. For a moment, you breathe. Then your mind quietly says, what if that's still not enough? So the number gets bigger. Then bigger again. It's like trying to fill a bucket that has a tiny hole in the bottom. No matter how much water you pour in, it never feels completely full. This is why some people worry about money even when they earn more than they ever imagined, and someone else with much less can still find moments of peace. The difference isn't just the amount of money. It's the story their mind tells about it. Here's something that might surprise you. Many people who constantly worry about money aren't actually afraid of money. They're afraid of what losing money might mean. Maybe it means disappointing your family. Maybe it means feeling like a failure. Maybe it means going back to a time in your life when things felt unstable. Maybe it reminds you of watching your parents struggle when you were young. Children notice more than adults realize. You may not remember every conversation. But you remember the feeling. The tension in the room. The whispered talks after bedtime. The way someone's face changed when another bill arrived. Maybe nobody ever sat you down and said, money is dangerous. They didn't have to. Your heart learned it without words. And hearts are slow to forget. That's why today, a simple expense can wake up emotions that are much older than the bill itself. This is where people often become frustrated with themselves. They say things like, I know I'm overreacting. I shouldn't feel this stressed. Other people have bigger problems. But feelings don't listen to the word should. If they did, nobody would have anxiety. Nobody would cry in the shower. Nobody would replay embarrassing conversations from 5 years ago. Your emotions aren't trying to win an argument. They're trying to tell a story. The question isn't, why am I like this? The better question is, what has my mind been trying to protect me from all these years? That question changes everything. Because it replaces blame with curiosity. And curiosity is much gentler than judgment. Imagine walking into a room where a frightened dog is hiding under a table. You wouldn't yell, "Stop being scared." You'd sit down. Speak softly. Give it time. Your anxious mind deserves that same kindness. Not because it's perfect. But because scared parts of us rarely heal when they're being shouted at. They heal when they finally realize they're safe enough to come out of hiding. Now, that doesn't mean pretending money doesn't matter. It does matter. Bills are real. Rent is real. Food is real. Life is expensive. This isn't about ignoring reality. It's about noticing the difference between solving today's problems and mentally living inside tomorrow's disasters. Those are not the same thing. Paying a bill is reality. Imagining losing everything because of one unexpected expense is fear writing a story. And fear is a talented storyteller. It always skips to the worst ending. It never tells you about the people who adapt. The problems that get solved. The opportunities that appear later. The strength you've already shown more times than you probably give yourself credit for. It only hands you one version of the future. The darkest one. But here's something fear never mentions. You've already survived days you once believed would break you. Think about that for a second. There were moments in your life when you honestly thought, "I don't know how I'm going to get through this." And yet, here you are. Maybe not untouched. Maybe not the same person. But still here. Still moving. Still trying. That doesn't mean every problem magically worked itself out. It means you're far more capable than your anxious mind allows you to believe. And that's where things begin to change, not when your bank account suddenly becomes perfect, but when you stop letting fear be the only voice telling you what tomorrow will look like. Because there is another voice inside you. It's quieter. It doesn't shout. It doesn't panic. But it's been there all along. And learning how to hear that voice again is one of the most powerful things you can ever do. That quiet voice doesn't promise that life will always be easy. It doesn't tell you that nothing bad will ever happen. It doesn't pretend that money problems can disappear overnight. What it says is something much simpler. We'll deal with it when it comes. At first, that might not sound very powerful. But think about the difference. Fear says, we have to solve every possible problem before it happens. The calmer voice says, let's solve the problem that's actually in front of us. Those are two completely different ways to live. Imagine you're carrying groceries home. One bag is already heavy enough. Now imagine someone keeps handing you empty bags and saying, you might need these later. So you carry those too. Soon you're struggling to walk. Not because of what you actually need, but because of everything you might need someday. That's what your mind does with money worries. It doesn't just carry today's bills. It carries imaginary bills. Imaginary emergencies. Imaginary conversations. Imaginary disasters. No wonder you feel exhausted. Your shoulders aren't just holding today's weight. They're holding hundreds of futures that haven't happened. So here's a small question I'd love for you to ask yourself the next time your mind starts racing. Is this happening today? Not next year. Not next month. Today. If the answer is yes, then your energy belongs to solving it. If the answer is no, then maybe your energy belongs somewhere else. That question won't erase anxiety. But it gently brings you back to the only place where you actually have any power, the present moment. Think about someone trying to drive at night. Their headlights only light up a small part of the road. They don't illuminate the entire journey. Yet somehow, people still make it home. Life works the same way. You don't need to see every mile before you take the next turn. You only need enough light for the road you're on. Anxious minds hate that idea. They want guarantees. Complete certainty. A map of the next 10 years. But life has never worked that way. Not for anyone. Even the people who seem completely confident are making decisions without knowing exactly how everything will turn out. The difference is that they don't mistake uncertainty for danger. And that's something you can learn too. Not overnight. Little by little. One choice at a time. One breath at a time. One worried thought at a time. Here's another thing that often surprises people. Rest is not a reward you earn after your finances become perfect. Rest is something your mind needs so it can make better decisions. Imagine trying to read a map while someone is constantly shaking your arm. That's what chronic stress feels like. Your brain isn't clearer because it's worried. It's actually harder to think. Harder to focus. Harder to notice opportunities. Sometimes the most productive thing you can do isn't checking your bank account for the 5th time today. It's making yourself a cup of tea, taking a slow walk. Calling someone who makes you laugh. Watching the sunset for 10 minutes without looking at your phone. At first, your anxious mind will probably protest. It might whisper, "You don't have time to relax." But ask yourself something. Has worrying every minute of every day actually solved everything? Or has it mostly stolen moments you can never get back? That's a painful question. Because many of us have spent years waiting for permission to enjoy life. I'll relax after I make more money. I'll be happy after I pay off this debt. I'll finally breathe after everything is under control. But life has a funny habit of replacing one challenge with another. If peace always depends on having zero problems, peace never arrives. That doesn't mean giving up on your goals. Keep saving. Keep planning. Keep working toward the future you want. Just don't make the mistake of believing your life begins after your next paycheck. Your life is already happening. Right now. In this ordinary Tuesday afternoon. In the coffee that's getting cold beside you. In the song playing quietly through your headphones. In the friend who texted to check on you. In the deep breath you almost forgot to take. Those moments matter. Not because they pay the bills. Because they're your life. Money is meant to support your life. It was never meant to become your entire life. There's one more habit that quietly feeds money anxiety. Comparison. It sneaks into your day so easily that you barely notice it. You scroll for 5 minutes. Someone just bought a house. Someone else is flying to another country. Another person is celebrating a promotion. A new car. A designer watch. A perfectly decorated apartment. Without realizing it, your brain starts keeping score. I'm behind. They're ahead. I should be doing better. But social media is like walking past hundreds of houses at night and only seeing the rooms where the lights are on. You don't see the arguments, the debt, the sleepless nights, the second jobs, the credit card bills, the quiet fears that never get posted. You're comparing your whole life to someone else's highlight reel. And that's a game nobody wins. Instead, try asking a different question. Not, am I ahead of them? Ask, am I treating myself with more kindness than I did yesterday? That question doesn't make you richer. But it makes you freer. Because real freedom isn't only about the number in your bank account. It's also about the way you speak to yourself when that number isn't where you want it to be. And that's where the deepest change begins. Not in your wallet first. But in the relationship you have with the person looking back at you in the mirror. When that relationship begins to change, something unexpected happens. You stop treating yourself like a problem that needs to be fixed. You start treating yourself like a person who's been carrying too much for too long. There's a huge difference. Imagine a close friend came to you and said, "I'm scared about money." Would you look them in the eyes and say, "You're hopeless. You should have figured this out by now"? Probably not. You'd listen. You'd understand. You'd remind them that they're doing the best they can. So why is it so hard to offer yourself that same kindness? Somewhere along the way, many of us started believing that being hard on ourselves would make us more responsible. That if we criticized ourselves enough, we'd finally get everything right. But think about the moments when you've made your best decisions. Were they made while you were panicking? Or when you felt just calm enough to think clearly? Fear can get your attention. But it isn't very good at guiding your life. Compassion is. Not the kind that says, "Nothing matters." The kind that says, "This is hard, and I'm still here." Those 7 words can become an anchor. This is hard, and I'm still here. Try saying them the next time your mind starts running ahead. Not to erase the fear, just to remind yourself that fear isn't the whole story. Because it never is. There will always be things you can't control. The economy. Unexpected expenses. A company making layoffs. Prices changing. Life has always been uncertain. But uncertainty isn't the same as helplessness. Think about all the things you've already learned in life. You didn't know how to drive until you did. You didn't know how to handle heartbreak until you had to. You didn't know how to survive some of your hardest days, until those days arrived. Human beings are incredibly adaptable. We often forget that because adaptation doesn't feel dramatic. It happens quietly. One small adjustment. One difficult conversation. One new habit. One problem solved. Then another. When you look back years later, you realize you became stronger without even noticing. The anxious mind never tells that version of the story. It only tells you what could go wrong. It rarely reminds you of everything you've already made it through. So here's something worth remembering. Your past isn't only a collection of painful memories. It's also evidence. Evidence that you've figured things out before. Evidence that you've survived uncertainty before. Evidence that you're more resourceful than fear wants you to believe. That doesn't mean every outcome will be perfect. Life doesn't work like that. Sometimes plans fall apart. Sometimes unexpected bills arrive. Sometimes things really do become difficult. And if that happens, you'll deal with those moments one step at a time, just like you've dealt with every difficult chapter before this one. You don't have to rehearse every disaster in advance to prove that you care about your future. Preparing is healthy. Living inside imaginary emergencies every day isn't. There's a difference. One helps you build a life. The other quietly steals it. Maybe tonight, before you go to sleep, your mind will try to start another conversation.